You have seen them everywhere: sitting at a red light, the drum turning; parked at a job site, the drum turning; idling in a parking lot while the driver gets a coffee, the drum still turning. It never stops. And if you have ever noticed this, your brain probably filled in the answer immediately. It is keeping the concrete mixed. That is the obvious answer. It is also incomplete, by a lot, because here is what that explanation skips over. What exactly is happening inside that drum? Why a specific rotation speed matters? Why there is a 90-minute federal time limit on every single load of ready-mix concrete in America? And why drum failure is treated as an operational emergency, not an inconvenience. That slow, hypnotic spin you have always taken for granted is, in engineering terms, one of the most precise mechanical responses to a chemical problem ever built into a vehicle. The chemical problem is stranger than you think. Every piece of poured concrete you have ever touched, your driveway, the foundation under your house, the bridge you crossed this morning, the sidewalk you have walked on your entire life, arrived in one of those drums, managed against a clock that started the moment water touched powder, and cannot be paused, cannot be slowed, and cannot be reversed. By the end of this, you will understand exactly what that drum is actually doing. You will never look at one the same way again. Let's start with what everyone gets wrong. The first answer most people give is the right shape, but the wrong size. Yes, the drum is spinning to keep the concrete from hardening. That much is true. But calling it mixing is a bit like calling a hospital ventilator air pushing. Technically accurate and completely wrong about what is actually happening and why it matters. Here's the distinction. A cement mixer at a home improvement store mixes concrete. It combines dry ingredients with water and keeps them moving until you are ready to pour. That is mixing. A transit mixer truck, the kind you see at red lights, is doing something different. By the time it leaves the batch plant, the concrete is already combined. The ingredients are already together. The drum is not mixing anything. What it is doing is maintaining suspension. It keeps every particle of sand, gravel, and cement paste in constant tumbling motion so that no section of the load settles, stratifies, or gets a head start on the others. That is not mixing. That is a holding pattern. And here's where the precision starts to matter. Transit mixer drums don't spin at whatever speed the driver feels like. They run at 2 to 6 revolutions per minute during transport, slow enough to maintain suspension without over-agitating the mix. During initial charging at the plant, they run at 14 to 18 revolutions per minute to fully combine the materials. Those are not suggestions from a driver's manual. Those are parameters defined by ASTM C94, the federal standard that governs ready-mixed concrete in America. The standard also sets a hard limit. Every load must be discharged within 90 minutes or 300 revolutions after water is added, whichever comes first, 90 minutes. 300 revolutions. After that, the load is considered compromised, so the drum is spinning against a timer. But why is there a timer at all? Why does concrete have a 90-minute expiration window? And what exactly happens at minute 91? That's where this gets interesting, because the answer is not about mixing at all. It is about chemistry, and a reaction that started before the truck even pulled out of the batch plant. Cement is not a material that dries. That's the first misconception to clear away. Concrete does not harden because it loses water. It hardens because water triggers a chemical reaction that produces an entirely new material. Portland cement, the gray powder at the heart of every concrete mix, is made by grinding limestone and clay and firing it in a kiln at roughly 2,700 degrees Fahrenheit. What comes out is a powder chemically primed and waiting. The primary compounds in cement, calcium silicates and aluminates, are essentially stored chemical energy. They are stable as a powder. The moment water touches them, the reaction begins. Calcium silicate hydrate crystals start growing. They grow slowly at first, then faster. As they grow, they interlock with each other and with the sand and gravel particles in the mix, creating a structural web. This is hydration. It produces heat, and fresh concrete is measurably warm to the touch as it cures, and it is completely irreversible. There is no chemical process that unsets concrete. There is no recovery once the crystals have interlocked. The reaction proceeds in one direction only, and it proceeds continuously from the moment water is added. This is what the 90-minute ASTM limit is actually measuring, not when the concrete is mixed, but how much hydration has accumulated. At 90 minutes in normal conditions, the crystal network has grown enough that the concrete has lost meaningful workability. It will not flow correctly, will not consolidate properly, and will not bond to reinforcing steel the way it needs to. Pour it anyway, and you have built something that looks like a foundation, but is structurally compromised in ways you will not discover until it cracks. The drum spinning is buying time against this clock. The constant tumbling prevents any section of the load from settling and getting a head start on the others. It keeps the crystals from interlocking prematurely by keeping everything in motion. And here is where traffic becomes an engineering problem. A truck stuck on the interstate for an extra 40 minutes in July heat is not just late, it is losing workable concrete with every passing minute. At high temperatures, the hydration reaction accelerates, which is why concrete plants in hot climates routinely substitute chilled water or crushed ice for mixing water on summer pours, trying to cool the mix before it even leaves the plant. Some use liquid nitrogen injection. All of it is an attempt to slow the clock. But here is what that entire explanation still has not answered. How does the same drum that keeps concrete in suspension also push it out when the truck arrives at the job site? That is not a minor engineering footnote. The discharge mechanism is built into the drum itself, and it uses the same rotating motion in the opposite direction. One mechanism, two opposite functions, no separate parts. Look inside a transit mixer drum. Running from the opening to the back, you will find a set of helical blades, long curved fins shaped like the inside of a corkscrew, spiraling inward along the drum wall. When the drum rotates forward, these blades push the concrete toward the back of the drum and keep it tumbling. Aggregate particles stay distributed, cement paste stays in contact with water, and the mix stays homogeneous. That is the agitation function. When the drum reverses, the same blades act as an auger. They push the concrete forward and out through the opening, using rotation to replace gravity as the discharge mechanism. The drum is also tilted about 15 to 18 degrees from horizontal, which assists the auger action during discharge. This is a remarkably clean solution. One drum, one set of blades, two hydraulic directions, and you have a machine that can both protect a mix in transit and deliver it precisely on site. There are no separate discharge valves, no secondary mechanisms, no complex switching systems. The direction of rotation does everything. The hydraulic drive that powers the drum connects to the truck's engine through a power takeoff system, a gearbox that diverts engine power to the drum whenever needed. When the truck's engine runs, the drum can run. Modern trucks can maintain drum rotation during idle, and that matters because concrete does not care whether the truck is moving or parked. The hydration clock does not pause. And here is where drum failure becomes an emergency. When a hydraulic pump fails in transit, which does happen, dispatchers do not treat it as a breakdown to be scheduled. They treat it as a race. If the truck cannot reach the job site or an approved dump site before the hydration clock runs out, the load will set inside the drum. Partially set concrete, subjected to forced rotation tears, apart the interlocking crystal structure rather than breaking up cleanly. The result is concrete with compromised strength that looks fine but is not, and a drum that may require hours of jackhammering or even full replacement. Drums cost between $10,000 and $20,000. But here's where it gets genuinely strange. This elegant, precisely engineered solution, the helical blades, the reversible hydraulic drive, and the standardized rotation speeds, is less than 100 years old. Before it existed, concrete was mixed at the job site every time, by hand or by a stationary machine. The story of how the transit mixer came to exist and what it replaced reframes everything about what you are looking at when you see one of those drums turning at a red light. In 1916, a man named Stephen Stepanian in Columbus, Ohio, patented an idea: a rotating drum mounted on a motorized chassis that would mix concrete as the vehicle traveled to the job site. The concept was simple. The execution took decades to get right. Before the transit mixer, every concrete pour required setting up a mixing operation on site. Building a bridge footing meant a temporary mixer, a crew of laborers, and a supply chain delivering dry ingredients separately. Building a high-rise meant a concrete plant essentially operating at the base of the building. The labor cost was enormous. The quality control was inconsistent. Mix ratios varied from crew to crew, batch to batch. The early transit mixers helped, but they introduced a new problem. Nobody had fully quantified the hydration clock. Early trucks sometimes arrived at job sites with overmixed concrete. Too many drum revolutions had collapsed the air content in the mix and weakened the final product. Others arrived with concrete that had partially stratified inside the drum. The 90-minute and 300 revolution standard, codified in ASTMC 94, emerged from decades of observing what happened when loads went wrong, and from reverse engineering the conditions that produced reliable concrete. In other words, the standard exists because builders learned the hard way, at significant expense, exactly where the limits were. Here's what that history means for what you have been watching at red lights. Every transit mixer truck is operating inside a set of constraints forged by a century of failure analysis. The rotation speed, the discharge timing, the 90-minute limit, none of these are arbitrary. They are the engineering residue of every bad pour, every compromised foundation, every drum that had to be jackhammered out, distilled into a federal standard. And here's the part that should embarrass you just a little. You have been in contact with this system your entire life. The concrete in your driveway, the slab your garage sits on, the bridge approach you drive every morning, the sidewalk your kids learn to ride bikes on. All of it came out of a drum that was spinning against a clock, managed down to the revolution count, timed to the minute, governed by a standard most people have never heard of and will never think about. That slow rotation at the red light is not routine. It is precise. It is urgent. It is the visible surface of one of the most carefully engineered chemical management systems in construction history. And now you are ready for the complete picture. So here's where you actually land after all of this. You came in thinking you were watching a truck keep concrete mixed. What you were actually watching was a machine managing an irreversible chemical reaction against a 90-minute federal time limit, using a helical blade design that performs two opposite functions from a single mechanism, driven by a hydraulic system connected to the truck's own engine, governed by a standard built from a century of bad pours and compromised foundations. The drum is not spinning because someone decided it should. It is spinning because calcium silicate hydrate crystals are growing inside it right now, and the moment the rotation stops, they start interlocking, and nothing gets them apart. Next time you are sitting at a red light behind one of those trucks, you will know exactly what is happening in there. A clock is running. The blades are turning. The chemistry is advancing. And the driver is managing all three simultaneously on their way to a job site where that material becomes something permanent, something someone will stand on, drive on, or build the rest of their life on top of. That is not a truck mixing concrete. That is a chemical reaction on wheels with a deadline. And if you think ready-mix concrete is strange, wait until we get into why that concrete in your driveway is still getting stronger right now, decades after it was poured, and what is actually happening inside it at the molecular level that most engineers find genuinely surprising.